I'd like to begin with a poem from James Autry that I think sets a tone for today. Sometimes you just connect like that, no big thing maybe, but something beyond the usual business stuff. It comes and goes quickly, so you have to pay attention. A change in the eyes when you ask about the family, a pain flickering behind the statistics about a boy or a girl in school, or about seeing them every other Sunday. An older guy talks about his bride, a little affectation after 25 years. A hot eye achiever laughs before you want him to. Someone talks about his wife's job or why she quit working to stay home. An older joker needs another laugh on the way to retirement. A woman says she spends a lot of her salary on a babysitter, and a good one is hard to find, but it's worth it because nothing's more important than the baby. Listen, listen. In every office and workplace and community, you hear the threads of love and joy, fear and guilt, the cries for celebration, reassurance, and somehow you know that connecting those threads is what you're supposed to do, and business takes care of itself. Somehow you know that connecting the threads is what you're supposed to do, and business takes care of itself. The role of a leader today, and this is very important, the role of a leader today is to call people from different perspectives together for a greater good. To call different people from different perspectives together for a greater good. If you're only talking to people who believe the same things that you do, if you only talk to people who like what you have to say, you're not a leader. You're a member of a sorority or fraternity. Leadership is calling people from different perspectives, and that's what's really amazing about servant leadership. It's not partisan. It's not any one particular religious denomination. It pulls together the threads of the community where everyone can participate because everyone can serve and everyone can lead. Here's what's really extraordinary in America today. Things are getting better. We have less people living in poverty. Our educational system, more people are graduating from high school. Our water and our air quality are getting better. Look at the production of our land and our farmers and what they're doing. Think about in terms of our levels of technology. And if you begin to study these things, everything is improving. But there's one part of our lives that we're experiencing a deficit, and it's community. It was exacerbated by the pandemic in terms of isolation or alienation. So our task now is to kind of come back together. And how do we bring people back together? To appreciate each other's gifts and differences. To recognize that everyone has burdens, but everyone has strengths. And that's what Greenleaf recognized back in the 1970s when he said this: the best test for a servant leader, because of your leadership and your organization and your community, do people become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants and leaders? And here's the moral imperative. And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Now think about it for just a moment in all of our communities. As we have rising gas prices, rates of inflation, who are we concerned about? The people who don't have the extra discretionary income for food or for gas or for the basic necessities in life. And that's what happens in terms of servant leadership. How is it that we serve everyone within the community? I am so happy to see so many of you who are here today in uniform. Thank you for your service. You are public servants. Each and every day, from an early time in your life, you decided that you wanted to serve the common good. You don't only serve the people that you like. In fact, oftentimes you end up serving people that might not like you. But you do it with dignity and respect in order to bring people together. And this is the nature of community. Now, Robert Putnam at Harvard said there's two kinds of ways in which we build social capital, or those connections. One is bonding, by the ways when we talk to and with the people that we know, but out of that bonding comes bridging. So we build strong relationships with the people that we know, our families, our friends, our neighborhoods, our churches, our nonprofits, our organizations, but then we have to bridge out. How do we take what we've experienced and make sure that we commit ourselves to the greater good? And so those are the themes that we'll be talking about here today. Deanna?
Wow.
Well, now, Tom, that's nice philosophical, and I'm in that school. But how in a community, I mean, how do we do that? How does that look like? What does it look like? Deanna, you got any thoughts about that?
I think that when I think about community and in a practical sense and what it means with leadership right now today, to me it goes so hand in hand with healing. And that's what our community really needs right now is a whole lot of healing and leaders that are able to bring us together so that we can heal together. So that's to me it feels really big. I have 3 boys at home. My oldest is 16, and he just broke up with his girlfriend after 6 months, and he has been heartbroken all weekend long. But we just had a really long conversation over the weekend about when you bring people together, people are different. We're humans. We're flawed. We have different ideas. We have different beliefs. Anybody who experiences the same thing is going to experience it in a different way. And because community is built on people and we are all so different, there's going to need to be a whole lot of healing for us to build community together. So those things in my mind all resonate very, very closely together, and something that in the leadership and the people that I'm talking to these days, that idea, that feeling of good leaders being able to bring people together to heal together really resonates with me.
What we do each day, how we walk, how we talk, and courtesy is, kind of common sense. We've in some way been taught that by somebody. Just that simple act is a big deal. There are people that walk down the street that nobody's talked to today. Somebody walks down the hallways. Nobody's ever said hello to them. They have something on their mind. Just to break the mood that they're in and say, good morning, good afternoon. I do it with everybody as long as I can get their eye contact. They apparently don't have something in their ear they're listening to. But sometimes I even get their eye and I wave at them when they're in that condition. I got a better word than that. So it works. You don't know, and it doesn't have to be verbal. And I have an example that, if this seems right, I'll share it with you. That it does profound, and it's not verbal.
Let's look at what's taking place in Ukraine. The refugees leaving Ukraine, and one of the towns on the border in Poland took in a town of 60,000, took in 60,000 refugees in one day. In La Crosse, we have 290 people that are unsheltered, and we're having a hard time getting ourselves to come together. A town of 60,000, and there's 290 people that we find to get unsheltered, and yet Poland took in 60,000 people in one day. The real sense in terms of community. What do you do for the least privileged? How do you take care of the refugee? That's kind of we saw that happen. It is possible. Give you another example. Ultra Credit Union in La Crosse. One day in October every year when the credit union is closed down, they have 333 employees, and they send them out into the schools and the community to do whatever kind of service that needs to be done. Humane Society, teaching kids financial literacy in the high school, working at food pantries, community gardens, wherever people need help. So what do they understand is that their wealth comes from the community. Therefore, they have a responsibility to serve the community from where that wealth comes. That level of mutuality that takes place. And that's what happens. There's the difference right now between service and mutuality. I mean, service and help. When if I come to help you, Bernie, oftentimes I remain in control. I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix you. Service is a level of mutuality that you have something to teach me in the process. There's a level of mutuality, and that's what Greenleaf really believed, that when we serve other people, we are also in the process of opening ourselves up to being served as well. Haven't you had that experience? Haven't you gone to a food pantry and served dinner and you come away with an immense sense of gratitude? Like you received more than you gave that night? And you begin to recognize that this is what happens within a community when we understand that our mutuality and responsibility for the good of each other.
I love that. And from a perspective of working in an environment and being a servant leader in an environment where you have team members, people that depend on you, it's that same mutuality, right? It's walking in every day and saying, what do you need from me to do your job well? And it's not a matter of taking and taking, but what can I give you so that we as a team can thrive, so that we as a community, because that's what a team is a community, can thrive and can better serve those stakeholders that depend on us to do our job every single day.
One of the top criteria of servant leadership is listening. And, listening to understand. You don't have to say anything. Just ask the question or just listen. And you're going to have a very nice example of that here with one of your speakers. But there was a lady that came up to me at MSOE a couple of years ago, and she said, I came here just to thank you. I don't recall ever meeting her. She said, years ago, you sent us off to the Drucker Foundation. All of these people were exceptionally good leaders of nonprofits. And she said, you changed my life. Thank you. So I didn't do much of anything. I never met her. An employee of ours, something years ago, I listened and must have said something, but he regularly talks about, you saved my marriage. And I know in these situations, I don't do anything other than ask some questions. Not questions with conclusions, but questions that cause the person that's speaking to illuminate what they're thinking about. And they don't necessarily have the answer, but they go home and they do other things and they start processing in a way that you didn't. In a small town, I'll give you a third example. In a small town, a little island off Savannah, I was meeting somebody, and it's really a small town. So I was looking for a breakfast place that morning. There was only one in town. So I walked from my motel to there, and I did this, I think, 2 or 3 mornings at a time. 2 or 3 mornings. And the people there would not say hello, but I said hello to everybody walking down the street. I was just having a good time doing one of my experiments. And they kind of grunted or, that kind of they weren't accustomed to saying hello, is the example I would give you. Not unusual. Some towns are very much that way. I was in Charleston and I did some of that, and that's a distinctive difference. So the second day I did it, and by golly, probably a lot of them were the same people, and they start saying, hello, good morning, how are you? And then the third morning, just about everybody on the street said that. I've done that in 2 little towns, and it works. Expect nothing. That's very important. Just because of what you do, expect nothing, as long as your heart's in the right place. The heart and the head are connected. They both have a set of neurons. They interact. You've seen people whose heart and head are not working so good. And I had one in our church, and it was, I saw her one perfectly tall, straight, elegant woman. And then she got a divorce. And then her children were taken away. And then she tried suicide twice in the church. Her body, physical body, was going like that, and she walked around like this. So don't underestimate. Just don't expect anything. At least I don't. I try not to.
What I've come to understand is this: if I'm not practicing servant leadership at home, don't expect me to practice it in the workplace. This is a philosophy. This is a way of life that doesn't make that level of distinction. So let's talk about our homes. Families are primary communities, the families that we grew up in. And so our responsibility as spouses, as parents, our responsibility to our siblings. Now, this last weekend, I'm teaching a class on rituals and celebration. Every servant leader is a ritual leader. So you look in terms of the rituals in your organization, the rituals in your community. This week, we're going to have the ritual of Easter. Others are celebrating Ramadan right now. Others are celebrating Passover. So these rituals and celebrations give us our identity. So I had this gentleman come up who's a coach. And he said, my son is 8 months old, and this is his favorite book. Our ritual every night is I read this book to him every night. And it's his most precious love story. And he says, I told myself I was going to do this. And he started crying. Well, we had 4 other men who are there as fathers and husbands. And they each got up. And they each, I wasn't going to do this. Because they realized that the children entrusted to their care are as in need of the service and leadership as the people that they work with in their organizations or their institutions. That's the nature of community. And for those children who do not have parents who are able to care for them in that way, then the secondary community, which means all of us, have a responsibility to our children. Tony Dungy, in a marvelous book, The Mentor Leader. Tony Dungy, Football Night in America, had brought the Colts to the Super Bowl. Tony Dungy said this: the most significant work that an American adult can do today is to be significantly involved in the life of a child. Is that not true? Every child needs 5 adults other than their parents who care about them. Are we one of those 5? Are we open to that possibility? So you begin to recognize that the servant leadership stuff isn't something that's left for executives. Oftentimes when we talk about leadership, we're talking about bossship. Who's the boss? And I'm here to tell you we're all citizens, and therefore we all have responsibility to serve. One last thing, since I'm on my soapbox, let me just say this. A marvelous book to read is called On the Declaration, written by Diane Allen, who is the head of an ethics institute at Harvard. And what she teaches in her class is just read the Declaration of Independence. They just read and study no partisan politics. They just read the words of our founders and how the country was founded. And here's the last line. With a belief in divine providence, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred trust. Isn't that amazing? The pledge that those founders made to give their lives, their fortunes, and a trust, which is the foundation of all community. And that's what we're built on. Well, servant leadership restores trust because we believe in the power of relationships.
It's beautiful. I think I was actually just at a conference last week. It was with a bunch of educators. It was amazing. It was the littles, the pre-K, all the way up to higher ed, and all the educators in between together. And there was a word that I kept hearing in the different sessions that I attended, and that was love. And it was a word that you don't, I wish that we heard it more often when it comes to leadership, because I really think it ties back to being a member of a family and a community and what you do at home and what that means and what your family means to you. And then bringing that same heart, that same leadership model into whatever other workplace or other communities that you have around you. And that it's okay to do that. And that, to me, that servant leadership is really bringing that love wherever you are and being true to who you are and not showing up for work being one kind of leader and showing up at home being a different kind of leader. To me, that's how I try my very darndest to live my life.
This is a 40-year journey with a family. One member of the family, the youngest, I met him when he's about 4 years old, and he tapped me on the shoulder in the back seat of the car. Mr. Pieper, will you be my dad? And I said, no, I can't be your dad, but I can be your friend. And that evolved. And years later, when he's early 20s, he tells me this story. He says, I had this, now he's managing a good-sized restaurant, a chain thing. And he said they had a particular incident, and the boss knew about it. And until a patron brought it up, they did something about it. So then the boss said, I'd like you to run the restaurant. And he said, I can't run a restaurant for you because of what he did. But he said the way he runs a restaurant is he never tells the people what to do. He says to them, what is your solution? And he causes them to think. That's what you do when you ask a question and listening. And I said, where'd you ever get that? And he says, well, you remember when you used to ride around with a car, my friend? This is a guy that's self-image is so low, I have never been with him singularly until he's 20, mid-20s. He said, well, you never had the radio on. We'd go to museums and here and there, and you'd talk. And that's where I got it from. I don't remember talking about anything like that. But that's what he got. Today, and his journey included, his mother could never give him a positive comment. I practiced with her. Couldn't do it. He could do better. Dropped out of school, joined a gang because the gang gave him a T-shirt. His mother never gave him any praise, I'm thinking. So he joined the gang, and once you're in the gang, you can't get out. You get out, they shoot you. That's the way it works. And he ended up in jail twice, couldn't stand jail. He said, I have images that come back. The boss of the gang walked up behind somebody, put a gun to his head and blew his brains out. It spattered all over the room. He said, every couple of years, I have to go to somebody professionally to help me work through that again because it keeps coming up. Another one, they thought they squealed on the gang, and he didn't. They shot him. That gang is now down to 1 or 2 people. He left town to go to Washington, D.C. because he couldn't get away from them. So you don't know how you affect people. Expect nothing. I was completely mind-boggled with this whole family because everything I knew how to do didn't work. But there's some neat stories. With that, we're going to take a couple of minute break. We talked about love. There was a sheet out there, not enough for all of you, but you can take a picture of it. And it talks about, I think it's 7 different kinds of love. None of them are LOVE.